everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that was released, I believe, at Gen Con of last year, but it may have been Essen, can't really remember. I think it was Gen Con. And we're going to take a look at this game called Hyperborea. This was released by Asmodee a while ago. This is a bag building game, a cube building game, I'm not sure. You get cubes, you add them to a bag, and then you draw cubes out of the bag in order to take actions. It's got a fantasy theme with kind of a Euro-y mechanism of driving that game. So real quick, why don't we just take a look at what you're going to get inside of this box. We'll see how the game plays, we'll come back at the end, and we'll get my opinions on Hyperborea. So here you can see the components for Hyperborea all set up for a 3-player game. Now this will play up to 6 and the rules will not change drastically, but this map layout will. You'll see we have kind of a small map here with each player having a homeland tile with their city and some of their miniatures. And then there's 2 other tiles in this base tile area. And then the rest of the board is built up of a central tile and several outlaying tiles. And dependent on how many players you have, there will be more of these or fewer of these tiles added up. Now, the idea behind the game here is that people are going to be trying to get these cubes into their bag. This is kind of a bag building game, if you will. So they're going to be trying to add cubes to the bag and then draw cubes out of their bag in order to try and take actions. And depending on the cubes you draw and the decisions you make, you'll be able to do different actions. So you'll see we have all types of fun cubes here. There are 6 different colors of main cube. And then there are gray cubes. These gray cubes are bad. They're kind of like junk that you can't use, but some players will find ways to use them throughout the game. We have some minis. Each of the different players has different mini sculpts, and then there's ghost minis that will be protecting various things. So if we compare, for example, the green and the yellow minis, we'll see that green is an archer, maybe very hard to see, but he's an archer. And it looks like yellow is some type of mage that has a dagger. So very nicely made components. There will also be several decks of cards, and we'll focus more on these later. We'll have some victory point chips, and then some little rewards you can get from pillaging or conquering cities of different levels, bronze, silver, and gold, depending on where the city is on the map. Each player, as I said earlier, will also have a bag, and they're going to start with one of each of the main color of cube, plus 1 cube of their choice. And they will also have this player board that you can see out here. Now on this player board, you'll see that they are tracking, 1, the different types of actions that can be taken with different cubes. We'll get more into this in just a moment. And 2, they're tracking their skill levels, kind of. You can build up skill in order to get more cubes. And you start the game with some skill. You get to choose what skill you start with. So we started with 3 blue, 2 orange, 1 red, and everything else at 0. Once you go over from 3 to 4, you'll see that you can actually drop back down to add a cube of that color to your bag. And if you go all the way up to the top, you can drop down to add 2 cubes. So depending on your patience, you can get more or less when you decide to take that action. Now to play the game, players are going to be drawing cubes out of their bag, and they'll be getting more cubes and getting rid of cubes as the game goes on. At the end of each turn, or at the start of the game, for the first turn, you're going to be drawing 3 cubes out of this bag, and that will be the same every turn, unless you have something that modifies that. So, let's say that on our first turn I have drawn a purple, a green, and a yellow cube. I'm going to use these cubes to take as many actions as I can, and there will be some free actions I get to take every turn if I would like. We'll talk more about those in just a moment. But using these cubes, you'll see that we have several different actions that all have cubes required in order to play those actions. So for example, I could place a green and any other color cube here in order to get 2 movement points. Movement points will allow you to move out on the board over here. You're going to be moving your miniatures around and trying to get from one tile to the other. Basically, that's all movement is moving from one to the other tile. When you do this, there are several different types of tiles you can encounter, and as you get close to the face down tiles, they will flip face up to reveal so you can see what you're walking into. But when you may move into a swamp, and moving into swamps doesn't cost anything extra, but they're harder to move out of. They take extra movement. You can move into a forest, and moving into a forest takes extra movement, or you can move into or out of a mountain, and moving into or out of a mountain takes extra movement. On these tiles, you'll see that they have different features. So for example, this one right here happens to have a city on it. When you're in this tile, you can actually place one of your guys into the city as a free action, and you would get a victory point. That's what this little icon means here. So if you were to move one of your guys into this little city, place him on here, you would be able to get a victory point for doing so, but he's going to be stuck in there until you go to a reset, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now, the other type of feature you'll see on some of these is that you will see that you may have a ruins. So these are what ruins look like right here. Ruins have these little dots next to them, and they are going to have little chits placed on them. And these chits can be taken by a player by moving into the ruin. However, ruins will always be protected on any tile that's not the starter tile by a ghost. And you'll have to deal a point of damage to that ghost in order to get it off of there before you're able to move in. The same will be true of cities. You must clear them of the ghost before you may move in. But once you do, you'll move a guy in there. He'll be stuck there until a reset, but you'll get one of these chits, and the chits will have various things on them. For example, a free purple cube, or 3 advancements in your technologies. We'll talk more about iconography in just a moment. So that's movement, and you can place your cubes out there to get your movement, or you could place out, if you had, for example, a green and a purple, to get a movement and place another guy on the board. That's what this little symbol means, and you would place him outside of your starting city. The next area down here is going to be primarily dealing combat. So you'll see it has a little axe as a symbol, and you need red cubes and some other color cube, green if you want the extra benefit, in order to take these actions. These will generate points of attack, which you'll use in order to kill the ghosts that I talked about earlier, or in order to kill another player if they happen to inhabit the same area as you. Killing other players will be worth victory points at the end of the game, as will killing ghosts. These little icons right here are going to be defense tokens, and you'll see I have little defense tokens that I can place out onto the board, and they make my guys harder to kill for an entire round. So when I place on this, I would get one move or one attack, or 2 of these little towers that I can place on the board to make my guys harder to kill. Basically, they take 1 extra point of damage. The second one down here is simply a point of attack and a point of movement, and you can use these in any order. The next one here is going to be placing guys out on the board, much like this one right here, but it focuses on that and uses purple cubes as the primary color, and you can generate either some defense or some attack if you use the right corresponding cube. When we get over to orange, it changes a little bit, and orange is going to allow you to advance yourself on these tracks. So you'll see that if you place an orange and another cube, you can do 2 advancements on 2 different tracks, 1 on each track. So I could advance, for example, my blue, and I could advance my orange. Now that my blue is advanced, at any time I can drop this back down in order to put an extra blue cube into my green bag, and I'll have that cube for future turns. And this is a very important factor in the game, always making sure that you can draw 3 cubes or no cubes out of this bag, because if you draw fewer than 3, you just get a little bit of a stunted turn. So playing this portion is very critical to the game. The second one here is simply 2 advancements on the same track. The yellow is going to be how you earn victory points, and that's what that little symbol is right here, and that's what these little crystals are, is victory points for the end of the game. 1 victory point, or a victory point and an advancement if you use the specifically colored cube. And then finally we have technology cards, which require 3 cubes, so they're harder to get, but they give you in-game benefits that you can use repeatedly. So this one requires a blue and any 2, and will let you get a card from a little area that has bonus cards in it. We'll move to that momentarily. The second one gets you a card and a victory point. So you'll draw your 3 cubes, and you will play them out, trying to get as many actions or the best actions that you can in order to play out onto the board that we have over here. And we'll discuss what happens out on this area in a moment. But basically, you're going to be trying to place these cubes to advance yourself, move around the board, and collect other tokens that happen to be out there. Get bonus actions that you can get by moving into these cities. For example, the city on our main starting tile here, or on any of the tiles, may generate you something. So we can have an extra victory point. Or if we look at this starting tile right here for yellow, you'll see that we have one here that when you move into it gives you either a point of movement or an advancement on the technologies track out here. So you're going to be using your actions, placing your cubes to position out on this board. You must note that when you place these, if you place an extra cube that doesn't finish an action, you do not have to remove it. You can actually wait to place the second one on a future turn. And that these cubes will stay out here until you come to a reset. A reset will be when at the start of the turn you have 0 cubes to draw from your bag, and all of your guys will come out of the cities or ruins they're in, all of your cubes will return to your bag, and you'll start fresh with a fresh bag of cubes. Now let's go take a look at the cards. So here you can see the card selection that I was talking to corresponding to the blue cube actions. When you take one of those blue cube actions, you get a choice of taking one of these cards from this area and adding it to your own personal tableau. Each of these card decks, 1, 2, 3, and 4, corresponds to different colors of ability. So you'll see that this one is red and green, so that would be attacking and movement. This one is yellow and purple, so that would be placing new guys and victory points. We have blue and orange, which is going to be advancing in technology and getting cards, and then we have wild and gray cubes, which we're going to talk about right now. Now, when you take one of these actions, you first have the option of clearing out one of the decks. So you could go ahead and say, I don't like these 2 cards, I'd like to look at 2 different ones, and flip up 2 more from there. But then you're going to choose one of these cards to add to your own area. Each of these cards adds a new action that you can use, much like the actions you saw on your board. So you'll see it could be red and green for an attack and 2 movement. Or it could be permanently place 2 red and any other cube here, and anytime you get 1 attack, you actually get an extra attack. And so these ones would allow you to clone guys, or to kill one of your own guys to get 2 victory points, or it could be 2 advancements for a single cube, or, you know, put a cube back into your bag, or take a cube out of your bag, destroy 1 and get a different color of cube. And then the bottom ones down here will actually use these gray cubes. Anytime you take a card, you're going to get a gray cube. These gray cubes are pretty much useless unless you have cards to use them on. So if you draw one out of your bag on a future turn, you won't really have a use for it unless you've gotten one of these cards, or you happen to be the orange player with their special race. But the gray cubes will go into your bag like any other cube, and if you've accumulated any of the level 4 cards, you may be able to use them in order to, for example, destroy a cube and get a victory point. Or at the beginning of your turn, you could always get 2 of the little defense tokens to place. That's what this little symbol means, is the beginning of your turn, but it does require you to place a gray, an orange, and a red for as long as you'd like this ability to take place. Anyhow, if you buy one of these, a new one will come out, another gray cube will go onto it, and you will have new choices for the next player who would like to take a card, always remembering that you do, of course, accumulate one of these gray cubes. So we've talked about how you're going to place cubes in order to take actions. We've talked about cards that you can get in order to get further actions or further abilities to take different actions, but we haven't really looked at how that correlates to any movement or any action out on the board. So as I said, when you've drawn your cubes and it's your first turn or any subsequent turn, you're simply going to place them in order to take actions. So maybe with the cubes that I have, I decide I would like to place a green one here and a purple one here, right? Those will stay there, as I said, until all of the cubes have been drawn from my bag, and I actually don't have the option to take that other action. I can only take 1 action of each type in these different things. This won't really be a problem. It's not typically a problem as you accumulate more actions throughout the game, but just note that you can't really do another one until one's finished, and you can't really use multiple of the same actions in the same grouping. So now once I've placed this, I have 2 movement that I can use throughout my turn. I do not have to use them immediately. I just have to use them at any point on my turn as the green player. I now also have another cube left over, but maybe right now I'll hold on to that and start taking my movement. So my guys are out here. They're next to some neutral-ish types of terrain, so they don't have to really worry about their movement too much. So they're going to start using that movement. And maybe this guy here will move 1 onto the next terrain tile over. Now in this terrain tile is a city that he can activate, and he would activate that as a free action by shifting into that city. This would force him to stay there again until we get to a reset, until all of the cubes are gone from this bag at the start of one of my turns, at which point he would be able to move back out. But into moving into here, he would have the option of advancing one of our technologies. So we started out like this. He has the option of either taking 2 more movement or 1 advancement on one of these tracks by moving into there. So for example, I could move up my blue here, and now I'm past the threshold where I could add another blue cube to my bag if I wanted to. Additionally, we can move one of our guys over to here. That's our second point of movement. What he is able to do at this point is he is able to move into the ruins and take the top token from this stack. Anytime you move into there, you're able to take the top token. Future ruins will be protected by ghosts. Any of the ruins out on this area out here will be protected by a ghost, and you must kill that ghost before you can move in there by doing damage to it, by generating some damage with red. When he picks this up, he's going to get a victory point. He doesn't need to use it immediately, but he likely would, and he would get a victory point that he can add to his victory point supply on his board, and that's actually one of the end game conditions, is accumulating enough victory points. So he would put this token aside, it's now done, and he can't collect the second one until he resets and is able to move back in again. Our third guy doesn't have a point of movement, but what he can do is take a free action to step inside the city, right where he's at, and that would allow him to generate a point of movement and to go ahead and get advancement on the track here. So maybe he decides to advance again on blue and wait to use his action to add blue cubes to his bag until he can maximize his efforts and get 2 blue cubes. So now, he's basically taken all of the free actions that he can. He's taken all of the spent actions that he can, but he has 1 cube left that he wants to place, because if he doesn't place it, it will go to the unused cubes area, and he simply gets to do nothing with it. So perhaps he decides to place this cube out here, and hope that he'll draw an orange cube for his next turn so that he can get both a victory point and an advancement on his next turn. Once he's done, he's going to go ahead and draw cubes. But one thing I would like to mention is when he moves onto these tiles right here, the fog of war on these next tiles will go away. So he would flip these tiles over, and we would prepare them to be moved onto in future turns. So what we'll see is that this tile here has a ruin on it, and it's going to get silver tokens on those ruins because there's a little silver dot there. Additionally, it will become protected by a ghost. So you'll have to damage that ghost before you can move in there. Also, it's a swamp, so it has some movement restrictions. The one next to it simply has a city, so that city will be protected by a ghost as well, but once that ghost is killed, you can use the city to get a double advancement on one of your tracks. So now that he's at the end of his turn, he's going to draw 3 more cubes from his bag, he's going to place them out onto his board, and he is going to pass the turn to the next player, but knows that he does indeed have the orange cube he'd like to start his action for the next round. Now, alternatively, if the player had no cubes left over, let's just take a look at what a reset would have looked like if he had nothing left to pull from his bag at the end of his turn. So if he had nothing left, all of the guys that were currently inside cities or ruins would step back out. And basically they are now available to move again. So sometimes getting to a reset, having no cubes in your bag, is good because it frees your guys up to move. And now they can perhaps step into these areas on the next turn and try and take those ghosts out and finally move into the cities or ruins to get the tokens. Or, of course, to get the extra advancement. Additionally, you would pull off any cubes on your board that were already on completed actions, and you would put them back into your bag. Cubes that were not on completed actions can either stay or be drawn back. Now, we'd note for this player that he did have cubes left indeed. Now he only has 1 cube in his bag, which means after this next turn when he places all of these cubes, unless he can find a way to get more cubes into his bag, he's going to have a 1 cube turn. We'll go ahead and take a look. He would get 1 blue cube. However, on his next turn, he can go ahead and get an advancement. So let's just skip ahead and say the other players did whatever. He can place this orange cube here, get himself a victory point, and an advancement on the track, moving him up 1 spot on the blue track, and now he can get 2 blue cubes at any time he wants as a free action by dropping this back down. And he would put 2 more blue cubes into his bag, and his next turn would be 3 blue cubes. Still better than only a 1 cube turn. So, you'll want to pay attention closely to how many cubes are in your bag and how you might be able to get more cubes or remove cubes from your bag to either speed up or delay the reset on the board. So that's how that's going to work. Now, the objective of the game is of course to get the most points and to trigger the end game when you have the most points. So let's talk a little bit about how scoring works out. Of course, victory points throughout the game, these little crystals, are worth points at the end of the game. But the endgame conditions are going to be based on these little tiles you can see right here. There are 3 possible endgame triggers, and you can have a short, medium, or long game if you want to play to 1, 2, or 3 triggers. Those triggers are, somebody obtains 12 victory points. That's worth an extra 2 victory points, and you take this little tile, and that is going to give you extra victory points at the end of the game, and if you're playing to 1 trigger, would end the game. If you're not playing to 1 trigger, or you're playing to a different trigger, you could have it so that you obtain 5 advanced technology cards. That's these little cards up here, and that's worth 2 extra victory points. So accumulating those cards could trigger the end of the game. Alternatively, the third one could be that anybody places all of their miniatures out onto the board. Now, as you go through the game, you may lose miniatures to having them killed by other players, and accumulating a set of other players' miniatures is worth points, so you'd want to do that, kill out other players' miniatures. You only have to place the ones that are in your supply. If someone has killed your mini and kept it for points at the end of the game, you do not have to replace that mini. So, if you're playing to 1, it could be any one of these 3 triggers. If you're playing to 2, you would have to have somebody complete 2 of them. And if you're playing to all 3, the longest game, you'd have to have somebody complete 3. When that happens, the game will end. And basically, there's going to be several things that earn you victory points. Of course, the gems that we talked about will earn you victory points. Each one of the ghosts you've killed can theoretically be worth victory points. So killing these ghosts off of these tiles could be good for you. If you've killed 1 ghost, it's worth 1 VP, 2 ghosts is worth 3 VP, and 3 ghosts will be worth 6 VP. And anything beyond that is just 1 extra VP per ghost. Additionally, as I said, killing the enemy players is worth points as well. And if you have a complete set of enemy miniatures, you're going to get 1 point per mini for each of those miniatures, and then you cannot accumulate a second mini of the same player until you have a complete set for the first. So you would need, in this case, a purple and a yellow mini before you can go ahead and get another yellow or purple mini. Each one of those would be worth 1 point at the end of the game. Civilization cubes that you have in your bag, so any of these cubes that you have that we've talked about will be worth a point apiece. Not counting gray cubes, the objective tiles you get will be worth 2 points, of course. And then you'll have victory points on the advanced technologies that you acquire. So you'll see that some of these cards are worth more or fewer victory points. 2 in the case of this one, but some are worth 0 or 1. Finally, controlling territories out on the board is worth points. The territories in your own homelands are worth 1. Territories in the center, but not the very central tile, are worth 2. And the central tile is worth 3. And you must be alone on that tile, or actually have majority on that tile in terms of minis in order to control it. So that's basically the points. Basically, whoever draws their cubes, yes, of course, this is the luck factor, but uses those cubes to the best of their ability, plans ahead, manages to get points from collecting gems, finishing objectives, getting new technologies, and of course dealing with the other players on the board, will be the winner. And there you have it. That is Hyperborea from Asmodee, or Asmodee. A great game for 2 to 6 players. Good with a few players. Probably even better, yes, great with more players. Probably around 4, maybe up to 6. I don't think I've actually played with 6, but I've probably played with 4 or 5 several times. And I'm real happy with how it plays in that range. I'd say it's relatively innovative. I don't know if before this there were any games doing the cube building. Yes, of course, we've seen several iterations and different variations on deck building, and this is really no different, except for that it feels different, right? And the way that you use the cubes to drive actions, I think, is not new, but combining that with the fact that you're getting to choose, to an extent, what cubes you start with, what cubes you accumulate, really changes how things play out. And combining that with the fantasy theme and the board type aspect that's semi-similar to Mage Knight, Mage Knight is the right one, is really kind of cool. The game does have special abilities you can use with the different player colors. So green, for example, has one that completely ignores all movement restrictions from terrain, or gives you an extra movement every turn, one of the two. And you get to choose which one of those you want to use. And choosing those abilities, or deciding to use those abilities, does somewhat dictate the strategy you will use to try and win the game. Some characters are more war prone, some characters are more science prone, or technology card prone, whatever it might be. But all in all, the game feels very fresh to me. It has a great new feel. I've played it multiple times, and I've loved it every time. And everyone I've introduced it to, Eurogamer and Amerithrash, I guess is the term we're using now, Amerithrash Gamer, have liked it, equally, I'd say. So I definitely think it falls more on the Euro side to me. And if you're a cube pusher Euro player like I am, I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy it. There's a lot of thinkiness going on and how you can get the right amount of cubes in your bag, how you can get the right colors of cubes in your bag, and how you can optimize each turn in order to get the most out of it, and of course end the game in a winning position. If you like the theme is definitely there. I'm not still very sure that it's important, but it's there, and if you need that for your games, I don't think you'll be disappointed by the theme either. So if that sounds good to you, check it out. Probably one of my favorite games from last year, Hyperborea.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.